All right, my name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Austin Morris Bridges. We're at Enoteca Nostrana in Portland. It's November 2nd, 2020 somehow. Thank you so much for joining us today, Austin. We really appreciate this. First question for you, why wine?
I mean, it's been a long journey. I've started, I guess it would all start in restaurants because I kind of think that's where everyone starts at some point because they're interested in food and service and then kind of go from there. But, I was 15 and my first job was in the restaurant industry. It was kind of, I started working at this place called Chanterelle's Restaurant in Eugene. It was run by a guy named Rolf Schmidt, and 6'9" German guy. He was like a really intense dude, but also very calm and sweet, and kind of became my mentor for about maybe close to 8 years. I kind of started there when I was 15, and as I went through college and everything I kept kind of going back and working with him and whatnot. But I started as a dishwasher and a prep cook kind of situation, and he was just one of these guys. He was just one of the old guard chefs who just cooked everything himself. He had about 36 seats in there and would do 130 covers, doing steak Diane, paille de boeuf and coquille Saint Jacques and all these kind of crazy dishes, but everything was served with spätzle, and that was really cool. But he was just pretty amazing. He had 10 different fishes on his menu, and I just got to be right there with him and watch him prepare all this stuff, and it was pretty intimidating at first because he'd get pretty intense sometimes, but at the end of the day he's always kind of smile at me and we did a good job. And I know I just kind of became a safe haven for me, and became this place where really enjoyed going to work. He taught me a lot about kind of work ethic and this in service and building a restaurant. I just kind of liked the small restaurant vibe. The front of the house was run by this guy named Moaf Shar. I think he still owns a place in Salem, but I'm not sure. He was 5'2" Iranian guy, and they're completely opposite personalities, completely. Mo really taught me about service and hospitality and just remembering people's anniversaries and kind of really showering them, and I really was drawn to being on the floor, so I really wanted to try that. I think Rolf wanted to keep me in the kitchen, which is why at some point I decided to leave and become a server somewhere else, because he didn't he wasn't naturally putting me on the floor, and I really wanted to do it. So I left, and then it was kind of after that he brought me back and said, okay, that's what you want to do, let's do this. That was kind of a sideways note. I kind of missed some things, but while I was there, there was a guy named Aval Mosler, who was one of the early guys bringing in Riesling into Oregon. He was kind of focused on German wines and small producers, and it was kind of it was an opportunity for me. I'm just sitting there cleaning mushrooms, and Aval would come in and he would chat with Rolf in German and whatnot, and he would taste them on some Rieslings and whatnot, and Rolf would then pass it down to me and let me taste, even though I was pretty young at the time. So I guess it all started with Riesling, which is pretty cool, to be able to say that you were exposed and kind of knew what the different styles were and everything at age 16. It kind of grew from there. It was kind of the age of the California wines, Silver Oak, Diamond Creek, and Stag's Leap, and all that stuff, and definitely the infancy stages of really Oregon wines becoming very popular as well and contending. To kind of further my education as I kind of moved and positioned myself on the floor, I did take a wine class from a guy named Bob Sogi. He was kind of agriculturally background, and then he had taught these wine classes, and he like just kind of was just passionate about it, want to get people excited about it, and kind of did that when I was like I think 18 or 19. It didn't really all like stick at that time, but I was definitely like fully integrated in the restaurant industry. I loved it. I loved just interacting with people. I just like the energy, the family. It was kind of like a home away from home, and learned a lot about lots of things, and had a lot of other interests though. I was always one that wasn't nailed down to one thing. I was really into woodworking, so I started diving into shaker furniture. I was working as the wood shop supervisor at the University of Oregon while I was also studying music composition and playing instruments, and like writing string quartets and things like that. So it kind of like was always interested in lots of different things, and I think that's what I liked about the industry, was that it kind of offered me a place to work, but also just like it was the amount you could learn and like branch off and do all different things. I feel like you're always constantly like being introduced to new people, and just like the energy was really exciting. Then I had married at a very young age, and she got a job in Germany, in the Rheingau, in Wiesbaden. She was working on a military base doing like social work, and so I moved there, and I was then again there in the world of Riesling, and it was just really cool to kind of get even more in touch with just like the simplicity of German cuisine and wine, and going to markets, and just like seeing how that all came together, and how good it was together, and just kind of like thinking like kind of colloquially, and like, wow, this is what you eat with this and whatnot, and this time of year. So that kind of solidified some thoughts there for me. I had gotten a job though in Brussels shortly after that. I was reintroduced with a friend, and who I went to high school with, and he was a French major, and then married a French woman and lived in Brussels. And he would come to visit me in Germany. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just kind of like a dependent right now. I'm just like running every day and reading and playing music. And he's like, well, why don't you do this? And he like handed me he came down and gave me like a stack of like IT books. And it's like, I can totally get you a job. And so I read like everything about like networking and all that stuff like that. And I got a job at this place, and landed in Brussels, and where I lived for a few years. And it was probably like the easiest interview I ever had. I just walked in there. They're like, oh, here's your phone, and here's your gas card, and your keys to your car, and all this stuff. And I'm like, well, this is like way too easy. Like, this is like to be in your mid 20s, and all of a sudden just like be like, you have like a travel pass in America, in Europe, and can do whatever you want. And you have like get paid in Belgian francs, and it was like getting Monopoly money didn't mean anything. It's like, what's 1,000 francs worth? So that was really cool, and I think at that time I, really got more into cuisine. Brussels was an incredibly diverse city. It was kind of like a spider web the way the city is, because it has like an inner ring and then the outer ring, and then in between there's a bazillion like roundabouts that are all connected by diagonal streets, and then each like roundabout is kind of like a different neighborhood that might be Vietnamese, Northern African, you name it. Like, you could go to a different neighborhood and be like, everything is about that cuisine, those clothes, everything is. It was pretty neat. And so I would go there and check out the markets, and then just kind of try the different restaurants until I found like the restaurant that was like serving up the good stuff. And I got into Belgian beer, which was, huge rabbit hole. And there's so many beers. I mean, there's this one beer place I went to that was called Beer Circuits. It was kind of a weird name, but these guys were kind of rude. And I mean, if you went in there, like, ordered like a beer that everyone knew, like a Duvel or Westmaler or something like that, they would just like kind of like it was like coming in and asking for, like, I don't know, I don't want to make too many examples there, but they would shut me down and say you can get that anywhere. And then finally I'm like, well, how about something like this? And like, well, I got like 8 beers like this. And I'm like, just give me something that you think is special. And then they would like bring some cool allocated like beer and pour it for me, and they had verticals of it. I could go as deep as I want. I kind of like learned from that this thing of like, like, let the people who know what they're doing like take care of you, and you'll be very happy. And that kind of always stuck with me. And I kind of carried that with me, but I still wasn't working in restaurants anymore. 9/11 happened, and I was kind of faced with like making a decision of like staying in Brussels and trying to keep work. I was a contractor at the time, and I had just switched jobs, and the other job fell through after 9/11, so I was kind of like on the fence of like what I should be doing. And while I was living in Brussels, I'd come to visit a really good friend of mine in Portland a couple times, and I hadn't really experienced Portland as an adult until that time, and I just loved it. I also just loved every time I went back to the Northwest, getting off the plane. It was like that cool fresh air, and just like it just was invigorating. And yeah, so I moved to Portland right after 9/11, which was kind of like a depressed time for the city, and it was really hard to find a job. Circling back to when I worked at Chanterelles, on slow nights, I basically was being trained to be a chef at the time. So on slow nights, Rolf would tell me to grab a pan, put that on the burner, and kick up the heat and get it real hot. And then he's like, take me over here, grab the steak, and pound it out. He kind of just walked me through the whole process of like what he did on busy nights, until I got better at it. And on like busier nights, slightly busier nights, he would like let me take the reins and let me go as far as I could until I got in the weeds, and he would just then take over. So I had this big cooking background, and I've always explored that, and I'd always recreate the dishes he had for my family and everything. So I kind of had this big cooking background. So when I first got back to Portland, the first job I could get was to work in this kitchen at this vegan like Indian restaurant, or like it was called like Kalga Cafe or something like that. And it was kind of, it wasn't being run as well as it could. And I remember working my first night there, and like all of a sudden a bunch of people came in. We had all these tickets, and I'm like starting to put up all this food, and then like the entire kitchen staff was gone, and like I was like, where are they? And I see them like smoking out in front of the windows, and I'm like, what the hell is going on here? So at the end of the night, I'm like, okay, I'll take the job because I needed it. And I go, so what are you doing tomorrow? And he's like, well, this guy is coming in. His name is Moby. He's like, I guess a musician. I guess he's vegan and stuff. And I guess they're coming in with the radio station. I'm like, what are you cooking for him? And he's like, he didn't really like have a firm answer. I'm like, we're going to the store right now. And we're like, and at the time I was exploring being a raw fooder, because the first house I lived in was, the guy was a raw fooder, and he's like, gave me the challenge, and so I okay, this is like a cool opportunity to try to cook different things and try different things. So it just kind of all coincided that like I was like really good at making raw food and vegan food, and Moby was coming in. So anyway, this is a long diversion. I went to then I really wanted to get back on the floor because I knew I could make a little bit more money. I worked at this place called Zinc Bistro and hated it, but I was working alongside with Ben Bettinger, who was just getting out of chef school. He was working there and interning at Paley's place, and I was also working with Brian Steelman, who owns Por Que No. I don't know if you know Ben Bettinger, but he runs Laurelhurst and Big's Chicken. And it kind of all lined up like that, and I got fired because I went in for dinner, and the bartender brought me a drink, and it wasn't on the bill. And so I got fired for this thing. And I was like, wow, and okay, fine. And I went into Beyond Meats at the time, which was owned by John Gorham, and my friend Scott Ketterman, who owns Crown Paella, was working there. And he goes, how's it going? I'm like, fine. I just got fired from my job because the bartender brought me a drink. This is crazy. And then 2 days later, I got a call and got hired at Paley's place. And the first thing I told Kimberly Paley was, I just want to let you know I got fired for and I told her the whole scenario, and she's like, that's ridiculous, and just like freaked out. Anyway, I got the job, and I just found myself in a kind of really cool moment at Paley's place. I was working there with Ben Bettinger, Scott Ketterman, Jason French, who owns Ned Ludd, Lyles Railback, who is now with Kermit Lynch, Gabriel Rucker. The list goes on. It was just like a lot of like what our Portland restaurant community is now. Is like we're all working there together, and we're young, and we're just won like the James Beard Award and for Paley's, and it was just like crazy. Renee Gorham was working there. Her name was Renee Gray at the time. So just kind of a crazy time, and we worked really hard. We played really hard, but Kimberly was really on her shit, and she like definitely would quiz us every day on wines and made sure that we knew everything every day. And it was also kind of my introduction to John Paul from Cameron. So it kind of really started there, I think. I just started kind of like really finding wine interesting and finding it like in a service aspect, and like pairing and things like that was kind of all starting at Paley's place, even though I'd been in it for a long time. But like, when you're young, you're like sometimes not always like found your passion there. I worked there for about 3 years, and Clark Lewis opened, and I read that menu, and I just was just like, I just really wanted to work there. Brian Steelman had worked there, and he kind of like got me the job, and I was just really excited because I loved cooking so much. I loved cuisine. I just read how simple the menu read, and it was kind of reminded me of like reading a poem or something like that, just like so beautiful, and I knew all those flavors and how they would come together. And it was an all Italian wine list, and I guess I had kind of worked with French wines and some local wines and a bit of Italian, but it was a bit intimidating because it was an all Italian wine list that was really focused on a lot of varietals that I had not heard of before. So being like new and wanting to do really well and like be able to start to get to know this list really well, I just would go to the wine director and go tell me what to sell next and give me some descriptors on it. And he like boom, 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 and like tell me, and like, and then I'd go right to the table and go boom, and I'd sell the wine just like that. And I just kept doing that, and then I'd do like 3 times, and then I'd go to another bottle and do that 3 times, and go to another bottle. And it was kind of like blindly selling a lot of these wines, but I'd look at the reaction, they're like, wow, this is incredible, you know, like wow, what is this? And I'm like, I don't know. I haven't had it yet. So just the reaction like really got me curious, and we could take home any bottle we wanted. So I just started taking the bottles home and trying them. I tried this varietal. The varietal was Lacrima d'Amor d'Alba, and the producer was Luigi Giusti, and it's called Rubiano, but it was just like something I never tried before, and it was like, I don't know if you ever had the grape, but it's from the Marche, but it very, very floral. It's like rose petals, bergamot. It has this kind of black oil cured olive kind of like vibe to it. It's kind of savory. It's just like kind of all over the place, and I was just like, wow, this is crazy. And I'm like, this is just grapes that are fermented, you know, and aged, and this is what it tastes like. So I started becoming really intrigued, and so I just started going down the list, and like any varietal that was just like different and never heard of, then I just really wanted to try it. And so I did that. About 2.5 years later, I was in a coffee shop. Micah Camden just looked at me and goes, "Hey, I'm opening a new restaurant. You wanna run it?" I'm like, "Okay," because he'd been in there a bunch of times. I'm like, "Sure." And so I took the job, and I also think it's funny because like when you're that young, like your decision process is a lot quicker when you make those decisions. Like, sure, yeah. And then I like took the job, and then I like go in to look at the space, and I'm like, I mean, it's like 600 square feet, and I'm like walking, then my heart starts pumping a little bit. Like, what? There's gonna be a restaurant in here? And then I was like, this is crazy. What did you just sign up for, Austin? And I still hadn't met the chef and everything. I was working at Beast in the interim, just to like until everything got online over there. But and then matched up with Greg Prault, who is this amazing chef who ended up owning June. If you ever been to June when it was around. And we were just putting a box together, and we had, like play restaurant, do this, and so I kind of started like thinking about what I wanted to do with wine, and I wanted it to be an all Italian restaurant, all Italian wine, because that was kind of what my passion was. And I was really bummed because when I was at Clark Lewis, they had sold the restaurant, and it used to be all Italian restaurant, and then it went to like French and this and local and all this, and I just like kind of took the wind out of my sails. I wasn't like done exploring that. So when I had DOC, I was like, I'm going all Italian, and I even more so I was just even focused on everything else that people hadn't really like heard of. I felt like Piemontese wines had been like really explored in Portland, and so Tuscan wines, as at least the traditional ones like Chiantis and Brunells and things. So I really wanted to dig deep on these varietals that people hadn't really heard about, and I felt like because people hadn't heard about them, it kind of gave you a little bit more power to sell things, because you're like kind of the authority on it in a way. At the time, there wasn't a lot of options for all those varietals, so I kind of just like went through the books and kind of tasted all the things that I could find. But I think as I like started selling it, I think people were like, oh, there's a market for this, and like I think people started bringing some more things in. and I was just really on the hunt, like, can you get some more of this? Can you try, like, I want to try this, and like, blah, blah, and and then that's when I started doing a lot more digging, and realized that I had the power as a buyer to bring things in, and I thought that was pretty amazing. And I would totally support those things, and then I would be like, I want the next thing, and I wanted to try something else. And when I first started the restaurant, like the whole wine by the glass concept was that I wanted first to empower the customer to have the choice, to make the choice of what they wanted to drink. So I came up with this concept. It was like, okay, I'm going to open 3 reds and I'm going to open 3 whites. I'm going to let the customers choose. And once I've opened the 3 and the 3, that's what was by the glass until one was empty and someone else could choose something else. But then I would have a customer like, yeah, we want to drink this. And so I opened by the glass, and then I'd go to the next table and they go, what's by the glass? Well, I told them what the whole concept of how, like, to choose the wines by the glass, and they go, what's open so far? I'm like, well, the only thing that's been open so far was opened by them. They opened this bottle, and I'm like, what do you guys think of the wine? They go, oh, it's amazing. And they're like, we'll have a glass of that. So I couldn't even get past like a bottle of wine because it was like, it had this domino effect of how things, and it was like kind of cool to like start like seeing that, and that how the power of just like the energy of a room could like create this like vibe, and how you can be a proponent of like getting people interested in something, but it's like this person can also have some influence, and this person can have some influence as well. And so I started that way, but we then quickly moved into being a very like coursed meal kind of thing. We did 6 courses. We started with oysters. It was kind of an unconventional way of doing things. We'd then put down, if you were like a table of 4, we put down all these oysters. Then we put down 4 different like antipasti. We put down like 3 or 4 different primi, like risotto, pasta, whatever. And then we put down like 3 different entrees, and we put down like 4 different desserts, kind of thing. And people would just pass things around and eat them. And I kind of took it a step further. And I paired a different wine with each specific dish. And it was kind of a weird way of doing things, because it kind of put people out of their comfort zone in the beginning. But I like stuck with it, and I kind of developed concepts to like reinforce why I did certain things. And so I would start off everyone on the same wine. Funny part too is I also only used Oregon Pinot Noir glasses, and I only had Italian wine, which is also kind of weird. But I'd start off with a sparkling wine of some sort. I was kind of obsessed with Col Fondo Proseccos for a long time, just because it had this like it was kind of milky, pet natty, and like had this like kind of like limestoney like salinity to it that I thought was really cool, and I thought worked really well. So I'd start people off with something like that. But then I'd pair a different wine with each dish, and we put the dish and glass in front of each person, and then they're like, well, what are we supposed to do? What if I want to taste this and I want to have a sip of that? I'm like, then do it. And then people started like, sharing, and like had this like kind of communal thing, and some people were like, had to have their own glasses and stuff like that, and we were such a small place, we didn't have like the luxury of like polishing like glasses each round and like washing them every time, because that mean I would have to do them, because I was also the server, I was the runner, I was also doing all the pairing, I was like doing all the descriptions, so that was like absolutely impossible. So I had to like figure out a way to like get people on board to do it my way. And they slowly started coming on, and then I would like get to the next wine, and I would pour a little bit of wine into the glass to like kind of rinse it, and I'd tell them that this is called priming. I'm priming the glass with the new wine and just rinse it around and then drink it, and then I'll be ready for the new wine. And they're like, okay. And then some people like want a glass. It just took a lot of training, but eventually got everyone there, and it was kind of cool how it evolved because like when I would prime, sometimes there's a little bit of wine that was there before, and that would kind of blend with that. So they almost had this like kind of cuvee kind of experience, but at the same time they're then moving into this new wine. It was just kind of interesting. And then plus they're passing around these different wines, and I was kind of like try to find wines that would complement each other, but also like bring different things out. And as you went from, they almost all would pair with every dish, and then they also would like play off each other really well. So as you're like eating dishes and then take this sip and then over here, it's like it's kind of like became this new thing, so that was fun. And it was funny because after a while, people that really loved it, they would come back and they would then train the rest of the table, because they'd bring their friends and they'd be like, no, this is how it's done, and then you all get the same. They're like super excited about it, and like, and then this is called priming, and then you're supposed to share it around, and like all these things. And I'm like, yes, it's working somehow. Well, and we did the tasting menus, and we also did like the a la carte simultaneously. And I think also that had a huge influence because other people would see how much attention people are getting by doing the tasting menu and all the wines you got to try, that they would like start wanting to do that. But it was also a different opportunity to introduce these people with different wines. For 9 years, I never had one wine listed by the glass, ever. Nothing was ever on the menu. And there was a reason for that. And another thing, as my wine list grew, I just decreased the font. It was also right justified, and it was just like got smaller and smaller till like people couldn't read it anymore. But there was kind of intention in that, because I wanted people to like look at me and talk to me, because I knew the list really well. But the whole wine by the glass thing was, I felt like if I put things by the glass and like people see Rossessi di Dolce Acqua, like, they're not going to even know what the hell that is, and then they're going to see this price tag. They're not going to know the region. They're going to know this producer. And what's the point? Like, let's have a conversation about things. But I also didn't want people's like intimidation or not understanding what it is, or a price tag to like deter people from actually trying something new. So I really was important to me just to put it in the glass and let them try it, and that worked wonders, because it kind of dissolved. Someone asked for like, I want a Pinot Noir, I want a Chardonnay, or something they knew. And then I'm like, oh, and then I pour something. I'm like, what do you think? I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I go, well, that's a Zabibo from Marsala, from the Professor Antonio Baracco. It's got a little bit of skin contact. It's like rich. It's got this kind of salty apricot thing, and and it's gonna go really great with this next dish or whatever. And so then they were like totally into it. And I realized once I like had that control, I kind of started pushing the limits a little bit more, and just to wines that were just different. I think partly my background with like Belgian beers and really digging deep there, and just like kind of that knack for this like crazy wild yeast and things like that kind of made me want to explore the wine that way too. And I realized that there was so much there. And also just in my evolution of tasting wine every day, I just kind of always gravitated towards wines that were that way anyway. And I think what I started noticing is I was looking for this purity in wines, and I didn't know I was looking for that, but that's what I was attracted to. And I guess I didn't really understand the vernacular and the verbiage of things. I kind of like always had this kind of like childlike kind of curiosity of discovering these things that I just kind of like wasn't influenced by anybody. And so people would bring all these wines and what they thought were like incredible wines, and I'm like, no, that is the one. And then I just started picking these wines that were just, I don't know, they had more subtle, they had this like a more like they had a quality about them that were just more honest to me. And then I started learning a little bit. I realized about like inoculation and this and like different barrel treatments and stuff. I started learning a few things in that realm. And what I realized is I didn't really like wines that were inoculated, and I didn't like wines that were I just wanted wines that were just like kind of speaking for themselves. I quickly realized that I loved everything that Louis Dresner brought in. And I didn't realize that, then I started learning more about just like distribution and importing and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, so this guy is like not trying to please everybody. He's just curating wines that he loves. It was often like make references to like record stores and stuff like that. Like you could have like every bit of music on the table, but like why? Because this is what you're listening to right now, so why don't you just expose people what you're listening to? And I felt like that's what they did, and so I was really drawn to that book and really wanted to understand it and get deeper there. And I think as I went that route, of course, different my reps from different distributors were like, oh, this guy's into some cool stuff. So I started bringing stuff down, and I would just sell the shit out of it, because I would make that a pairing for like a week and just like be pouring that and everything. And yeah, it was just fun. I would just go on these like long like treads on things, and I would use it in different scenarios and different pairings. I'm like, well, I paired it with this, let's try it with this. And like I would just try different things, but I also wanted to give my audience like something like completely new every time they came in. And I guess the opportunity I had at DOC was just to like be in like complete control of everything at any time. I can like dim the lights, I could change the music, I could change the entire wine by the glass program like that, and I can read my crowd and the vibe, and I think that like it really built my intuition in the industry, and I think that's like kind of the coolest thing that you can ever learn in service is acting on that intuition and being receptive to it, because you have all this energy around you all the time, and you can like fight against it, or you can just like go into it and just like see where it goes, and I kind of did that, and if it felt moody, I'd make it moody. If it felt fun and vibrant, I would go that way. And I just kind of brought all the things I was interested in, music, wine, and food, and all those things together in one place. And it got really pretty good at it, because I started just kind of had this fluidity of I'd get there, I'd clean the bathrooms, this and that, like vacuum the floors, blah blah, and then I'm like, it's like 5:45 and I gotta do the wine pairings. And I just started like just doing it. I just like literally like a lot of times like I got 15 minutes before service start, I'd just be like, I'd just take a menu and I'd just start writing the wine pairings on there. And those would be the wines by the glass. I'd put a price on there, and then I'd just do it literally 15 minutes before and start pouring it and then seeing. It was kind of fun because, like I told you when I was at Clark Lewis and I'm like selling something kind of blindly, that was out of like it, and like to see the reaction, it was kind of cool just to like know it, see their experience of something that I just like came up with in my head before I even tried it. I mean, it's kind of crazy maybe, but and a lot of times I would like, it was the references that I had with like these certain pairings wasn't necessarily have anything that logical to do with it. It might be just like imagery stuff, you know, like I had this wine, I did some pretty unconventional things there. I would ripen certain wines. I got a lot of like wines that were, I guess they call them natural now or whatever, but like, that they were, you know, still finishing in the bottle, you know, and they had a little bit of like, you know, the carbonic going on and CO2 and I felt like those wines always expressed themselves when they then got some air and like resolved themselves and kind of became the settled space. So I started doing that. I just started decanting them and putting them back in the bottle. I'd check it the next day and do that. And I had different wines that were kind of like ripening at different stages. Like certain orange wines I found like could really go in some interesting directions if I took it a little bit longer. So I just started doing that. I had a bunch of things going, but this particular wine that I had, I believe was a Cascina Tivine. It was like a Ruque, something like that. But it was like, those wines are so like energetic and vibrant, but when they like settle, then you get these like kind of almond richness and this like chocolatey note and it's kind of florally chocolate qualities. And we had this like risotto and it had black chumpet mushrooms on them, and he did them in a way that they just got really dark and they just like looked like rolled shaved chocolate, you know. And I just like kind of I paired it on there just because of that, and then people were like, wow, this is incredible, and like we're super into it. So I'm like, okay, let's go with it. And I finally try it. I'm like, wow, this is pretty good. It's kind of crazy, but I mean, I just kind of like, I think that my approach was never like conventional, and it wasn't about like knowing everything about a region. It was a little bit more fantastical in the sense that like I kind of like started creating this imagery for myself. You know, a lot of these producers that I work with didn't have websites. They didn't have a lot of information about them. What I got was through the reps or whatnot, but even that was pretty insufficient. And so it's like there was a lot of room for me to like fantasize about who these people were, where they lived, what their life was like, what the terroir was like, and I just kind of like would piece it together in my head, and I would kind of taste things in wines that reminded me of things of what could be there, or you know, like what could be in the soil or whatever. And I thought that was kind of cool because later I would go to these places and a lot of this stuff was true, you know, and it was all because I created this for myself. You know, it was like almost like, wow, how did I get like this? This is in the soil, and this is what I just asked these questions, and like, and they would give me the answer for it, and I'd be like, wow, this is crazy. And I thought it was kind of neat because it's a different way of learning, because a lot of people, you know, learn like the text first and learn like, oh, this is you know calcareous soil and this, and then you like this is what you should be tasting. But I kind of like went the other route and just kind of made the stuff up for myself. But then later learned that I was like mostly right, which was pretty cool. And I kind of liked that because it was creative for me. It wasn't like what everyone else I felt like was doing, and it kind of left a lot for my imagination, and it seemed kind of romantic to me. I don't know, like that. I just think that being so into music and the arts and everything, I just liked that there was some room for to imagine things, and it wasn't like all just like black and white. And I realized like that wine is very much not black and white. You know, it's like you have so many variables that are going to change things all the time. Vintage, the you know, whatever the winemaker is into at the moment, and how are they evolving as an artist? Who are they inspired by? And I think that made me, I related to that a lot more being in wine, because it was very much how I was, and how I was inspired by different music at different times and different cuisines and wine and stuff, and I was kind of evolving too. So I really sought out, I think, people and winemakers that I felt like were honest, and they weren't doing it to be the best at something. They were doing it because they were very passionate about it, and they really cared, and they were artists, and that it was so cool to see that they could do that with an organic, you know, product like a juice, you know, like a juice can be art, and I think that was like the coolest thing ever to me, you know, like that food could be art and on this different level. And that was another aspect to me, is like I feel like wine a lot of times it gets like up here in this kind of like pretentious like pedestal sometimes, and I think I was so enamored by the fact that, like, especially when I would go visit, that like wine was just food, you know, and I didn't want it to be any more complex than that, you know, and that it was something that people enjoyed with their meal, and it was complementary at every point, and they're meant to go together. And I just feel like that was like the most important thing, to keep it humble and keep it simple, and to realize that it's a food and that we shouldn't get too crazy about it. Of course, you know, it's undeniable. There's people that are just remarkable at what they're doing in that field, and those wines can be transcendental, and but it's just amazing when you can like bridge that gap of just being an artist and like also keeping it simple, you know, and approachable and humble. So that's kind of my arc there. I was ready for a new challenge, and I think that I had been looking for a while, and wasn't sure if I wanted to like open my own place or, you know, something like that. And John Paul reached out to me and said, "Hey, you know, they're looking for a wine director at Nostrana." I'm like, this could be really cool. And you know, and then they came in for dinner. Actually, before you said that, I think they were like checking it out at that time. I never asked Kathy that, though. I should ask her. They had come in a couple of times, and man, it was just like they came on some really great nights, and I just like felt like everything, like all the stars aligned, and I was like had this really fun time with them. And so I applied for the job. I thought it was like a really cool opportunity, to like work for a place that I feel like was doing things for all the right reasons. I think that it's always hard, like dividing business from passion, and that where we have to make money at this and we gotta sustain this business, but how do you integrate the two can be challenging, especially for a big place. We have lots of employees and all that stuff, and I didn't really realize that when I was applying for the job, but I had deep respect for Kathy and what she had done for the community, and she was always involved. And Nicholas, who's our operations manager now, he was deeply into Italian wine and created a really cool program here. So it felt like kind of a natural step for me to go somewhere where I feel like I could have extend my reach a little bit. DSU wasn't going to get any bigger than 28 seats, and I was ready to see how my influence could grow and get more people exposed to different things. And there's a lot of fun ways you can do that here. With glass pours and things like that, which I never had. It seemed like, now I have glass pours, wow. But then training staff and then getting them exposed and all of a sudden being someone that's influencing young servers and people that are, oh, what's that wine that you poured? What's this? And it's pretty neat for them to be their entry level point in the industry, where when my entry point was far different. I had to almost create my own interest, and things were evolving as I was doing it, and I feel like that's kind of the torch that you can pass off as this is now where you get to start, and you can go even further from here, and we're lucky we live in Portland, and Portland's such a sponge for these type of things, and people really take it as far as they can. We have a really cool wine community here, and it's just to see it grow over, the 18 years that I've been here, or even just the since 2008 when I opened DOC. I mean, I felt like I was starting from scratch at that point as far as what I was into. But to all of a sudden be in this place where I'm, gonna have a deeper influence, and be a little bit more behind the scenes. It was hard for me because I'm such a interactive person. I need to be on the floor, and I was on the floor selling wine a couple nights a week, but all of a sudden I'm teaching wine classes and how I'm not the traditional teacher, I'm the way I learned about wine wasn't textbook, and so I have to almost create this curriculum that's built around who I am. But does that work for everyone, or is that what they expect from me? I'm not sure. So there's pretty nervous about it at first, and it challenged me in a lot of ways, because I feel like I have just a different way of approaching all that stuff, and it's more of a spiritual thing, where as a textbook thing, and I like that. I like it because it gives me opportunity to learn more, and I feel like a lot of information, you can cram all this information in your head, you just oh, I read all this stuff, I got all this, but do you know it, and no, the only way you're gonna really know it is by doing it. And until you're actually exposed to it, until you actually develop your palate, your own personal voice in this wine world. I mean, the spectrum is from here to here, right? So like, where are you gonna what path are you gonna create within that little world, with huge world? And I feel like by me just still being a student, it gives me an opportunity to have those like spontaneous little moments, like I did when I went visit as producer, and like, you know, things were as I imagined them. You know, I don't want to lose that side of things for myself, because that's what gets me excited for life. That's what, like, when all those things like come together and you have these like awesome moments. For example, I mean, it was during the Chicory Festival. It was about 4 years ago, and we were at Ayers Creek, and I was talking to Mirta Zirok, I'm sure you know, who is the daughter of Elizabeth de Foradori, and she was working out there, and very passionate about chicories and all that. And we were just been like, the event was kind of over, and we were like standing there, and we were like chatting about like, you know, what do you pair with chicories and stuff. I'm like, well, and I was asking, well, what did they pair with chicories there? And he goes, you know, like, Italians are weird about like eating salads and like eating wines with salads or whatever, and it's kind of weird. And she asked me what I would pair with it, and I was like, well, I mean, chicories are from like, you know, Treviso, Veneto. You gotta have like maybe some sort of prosecco. So it was like I said Casa Costa Piane, the briquette col fondo prosecco, is what I said. And right when I said that, Carol, Anthony's wife, was standing there with a magnum of Casa Costa Piane, and we were like, looked at each other like, what just happened? You know, so it's like, it's just like weird things like that I like really look forward to in life, because as much as I want to like chart and like know everything, I like to leave some things up for the universe to like kind of like line up for me, you know. And that's kind of always been my like path with wine, and I've kind of just taken like little cues from moments that have happened that I feel are meaningful to me, that like resonate with me on like kind of a deeper level. I've never been like a one to like want to be in the spotlight or anything like that. I kind of just want to always just do my work, and I think kind of where I started kind of ingrained that in me, that it was like about doing something that you believe in, and doing it exactly how you want to do it. That really dictates the direction or what people are going to respond to, you know. And I think we're in a really interesting time now with like, well, we're in a really interesting time now. But, you know, prior to this whole COVID-19, for the record, that's happening right now, I don't know, we've lost a little bit of that like natural evolution of a restaurant, or where things kind of just are discovered by word of mouth and just kind of naturally. Like everything now is like something's open and it's like blasted here, it's Instagram, this and that and that. But there was something kind of very charming and beautiful about just opening your door, you know, and then like having this bit of like nervousness and anxiety of like, oh, the first person is going to come in, and then the second person, and this, and then like you do this, and you're kind of like changing it and trying different things, and you're kind of evolving your art as you're opening, and though that still exists, I know it does, but it's just like, it seems like there's something that is not like that very much anymore, you know, because everything gets like so publicized. and influenced by different people and stuff. And I love like the simplicity of the other model, you know? That people just like, oh, just popped in because of this. They were walking by and decided to go in there, and then they had this incredible time, you know. But
is there more of a pressure now to be successful immediately, to immediately be a hit?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think for a variety of reasons. Things aren't cheap, you know. Like labor's not cheap. Your rent's not cheap. I mean, there's a lot of competition, and there's a lot of pressure to be competitive. And I think that a lot of times doesn't create authenticity, because I feel like now you're like, what are they doing? What's happening over there? You know, and I kind of miss the days of just that you had to go there to really experience it, to really know. And yeah, you can read a review or whatever, and a lot of those reviews I feel like are biased anyway, and don't really give the complete picture of what someone's trying to be doing. But there's something beautiful about just you have to go there to experience it, and that's the only way you're gonna know. And it changes all the time. When we first opened, because of my IT background, I put up the website the night before. I built out the HTML, and it was just white with black border, and it was all just HTML text with my wine list, and that was it. But I would only update the wine list until after I moved on to the next wine list. So there was always behind a few things, and it was kind of intentional, because I wanted there to be some surprise when you went there, you know, that everything wasn't exactly what you did your research on or whatever. There's going to be something new, and I'd always try to do something different, just because I'm here, I might as well develop a new skill or something. I used to make these little cocktails at the end for everybody, and I would put, I'd bring quinata, or I started making my own quinatos, and I started making my own vermouths, because I was I have all this white wine left over, and I have all this red wine left over, and on Saturday, and I had 2 days I was closed, so I just being able to cook it down and make some white vermouth, and then I'd make some quinato, or some a bitter vino amaro or something like that, and then I put on the menu add on $15 and start with some vermouth and end with an amaro, you know. And it's all made from this really amazing juice that all cuvee together and put together. But I would I'd make this cocktail with the amaro sometimes, and I'd use a zest with that, and I'd bring everything to the table. And one day I just decided I was gonna start throwing the zest into the glass. And I started, and sometimes I'd hit people, and but I committed myself to it. I was I'm gonna do this. And I got really freaking good at it. So I started, I'd have a table of 8 people, and I just start going, and be ding, 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 and they're what the fuck just happened? And I did that every table, and some people I did it so fast, sometimes people didn't even notice that I was doing it. But I was I'm doing this, I might as well get good at something else, you know.
Why is this crazy person throwing fruit at me?
Yeah. But I think that part of it too is just I love service, and I felt there's an artistry to service that I feel has been lost, and I do hark back to those days of the old guys with doing the flambe at the table, there's something really intentional and cool about people who really try to take it to the next level, and it's not just about like something like creating easy systems that are like really fast, and it's more about like going above and beyond, and yeah, it's always harder, and it's always like more intense, and like it makes your day, but it gives it, I feel like it gives like you something more to believe in, and I feel like customers really like respond to that, and they can just tell you care, because I mean, obviously I could put wines by the glass on the menu. I could not bring 3 bottles to your table and pour it, and you might not like one of them, and I have to bring something else over, and that's like 5 steps, like I can make it really easy, but I just felt like it wasn't. I feel like a lot of times the hard way is the best way, and I find that way in wine and food and so many different things, that it's doing things like the intentional way really brings a lot of life to it.
So tell me about developing that kind of service philosophy, because you talk about kind of harkening back to the table side service and the over the top customer service. Nobody really expects that anymore. So do you have to kind of build that bridge with people before you do something like that, or are they taken aback because you're having all of this service, or is it something they welcome?
Well, in the context of DOC, I think people started like really expecting it, because it's just kind of what I did from the beginning. And it's not like it was intrusive service or anything. I think that I did things very quickly, but I only had so much time, so I had to like do things like create my service in a way that I could do it and move away and like go to the next, because I had like maybe 28 pairings to do right before the next course, but I also had to clear the tables and like reset them and everything. So it's like I had to do things really quick, and I think because I was just doing that, I became very seamless. I knew that room like the back of my hand. I could probably like, with a few steps with my eyes closed, I knew exactly where I was, and I would swivel around. It was almost like a dance, I had like a hole in the bottom of my one shoe that I wore through because I had these like loafers because I always pivoted on the same foot and stuff. It was like, just like, I loved the fact that like if you like really looked, you could probably see all the places where like I hit my little service spots, but I did it so fast and quickly. And then when there was time for engagement, then I would go that. If people wanted engagement, then it was very obvious. If people didn't, then they didn't. But I think that a lot of times it was that type of service that people were looking for. They wanted to be shocked because they weren't used to that, and it was kind of like that is what like created certain domino effects in what I was doing there, because I would do something for one couple that are at a family table, and the 3 other couples aren't doing that, and then they all want to do it, or vice versa. The 3 couples are doing it, and just one couple that are like kind of not like with the program, and they want to be part of it. So there's like this inclusivity and like this like not like missing out kind of thing, but also I mean the customers reinforced what I was doing, so it was like I already had people reviewing or telling them what they thought about everything, and it was great.
You talk about the challenge, kind of a challenging wine list, building a wine list of not only Italian wines, but Italian wines people weren't familiar with, and that you yourself in some cases weren't that familiar with. I'm curious about the idea of having to be the person to introduce each new customer to a wine, and you talk about the kind of intimidation factor, not knowing a region, not knowing a varietal, not understanding the price. Tell me about that kind of pressure that puts on you to sell that wine with people not being familiar with it at all and having no background with that kind of varietal before you.
I think having being really nice really helps. And I think that being confident is really important. And I think a lot of people kind of want to be guided. And there might be things that they don't like, but there's ways to get around it and kind of show them your vision and win them over. I found that that though I'm like, we'll just put things in the glass and just like walk away sometimes, I had enough variety on the table that people could, if they were drawn to something, then they could hang on to this or that. You know, if there's 4 different wines in the glass, like someone might like this one more than the other, but the fact is they're still going back and trying the other one, and then over time there's this kind of thing where they're just kind of like start to develop a little bit of a taste for it, you know. And there's also that reinforcement of like other people that are at the table that might be further along than they are, and like saying like, this is great, did you try this with that, and so forth. There was also, you know, like people like, you know, sometimes I'd bring like 6 bottles to the table and like trying them all and finally get them something, you know. That's great, but I knew what they were having next, and I'm like, that first one I poured for you, you know, like I just give them a little extra. I'm like, here, just hang on to that. When your food comes out, then try it. And I think that a lot of people want things to be perfect on, like, just like people are so used to like drinking the same thing, and there's like a very chemical response that happens there when you like get to a table and you're out, you're going to a restaurant, and you almost like you want to have that resolution of this, like it's probably called addiction. You know, it's like really so used to drinking a certain wine, like, oh, okay, life is normal again, life is good, you know. But there is something like, you know, like we all develop these things like cup of coffee, how we want our coffee every morning, and if it's not just right, then we're gonna like kind of start the day off on a bad note, you know, kind of deal. And that can happen at the dinner table too. And I think that you just ease them into it, you know. I that's why I said is a lot of times I would, you know, I could read the room, I could see where things were going, and then I could change the whole thing. If I had pairings laid out a certain way, I can flip them a little bit. I can ease them up. If I had the crowd was like, I see like, oh, we got these people tonight. Like I can just like completely change everything, and make it easier for some nights for some people, and then like slowly build it up as we get into it, and then others I just go right out the gate and get adventurous right away, because I knew they'd been in, or I just was feeling it, you know.